Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Now I am become the destroyer of worlds.
In my association with Project Group, they definitely withheld information.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
Tonight on Total Disclosure, we're joined by a man whose tireless pursuit of truth is reshaping how we view our ancient past. Michael Forrest, researcher, author, and documentarian, has spent the last 5 years diving deep into the mysteries that conventional history tends to ignore. With 6 published books and a library of compelling documentaries freely available on his YouTube channel, Aliencarving, Michael's work brings forward a growing body of evidence that could rewrite human history. At the heart of tonight's discussion are the explosive discoveries coming out of Mexico. Over 10,000 artifacts that defy mainstream timelines and raise pretty urgent questions about who we are, where we came from, and what's been hidden in plain sight. Are these remnants of an unknown civilization, a lost civilization? Are the myths we've inherited echoes of something real, something that we've forgotten? Like Graham Hancock says, we're a species with amnesia. Together, we'll explore the implications of these ancient anomalies, the suppression of alternate history, and the possibility that advanced technology once flourished long before our textbooks suggest. This is more than archaeology. It's a challenge to the narrative. Welcome to Total Disclosure. All right. Welcome back, man. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
I say welcome back, but welcome to the show, Mike. It's good to have
We talked a little earlier, so I know what you meant.
yeah. So this is a show that I definitely wanted to get it done before Contact in the Desert, because I think it's something that not only is it like really popular right now in the UFO community and just the all the related, phenomena, if you will. All the talk has been about these discoveries of artifacts, and the community is always up against this battle of show me the evidence, right? So here we have, a very unique opportunity to maybe talk about both. And so I just want to first start by can you give us a little bit of history about who you are and what is going on that people are talking about when it comes to these discoveries?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a business owner up here in Washington State. I was born and raised in Idaho, and never really believed in aliens or had any paranormal experiences in my early years. I came into this. I've been a gem collector, however, crystals and rock specimen. My grandpa was a miner, so that was always something I frequented, was the gem shows, and my wife cuts opals. So, my good friend, he came over one day and said he was going down to the Tucson Gem Show. And when he got back, he had some stuff he wanted to show me. He asked if I was looking for anything, and I told him a few things, and carvings specifically, because I'd been collecting little dragons and different things out of, different sapphires and such. And So when he went down there, he had found a gentleman named Mark Russell who had a booth and is an archaeologist who was on Scott Wolter's America Unearthed. And he told him there that he had carbon dates, showed him the pictures there that Scott had done for him, and he had found these artifacts all over in Jalisco, Mexico, and a place mostly near this place called Abuelos de Jalisco. And so I'd done some, brief research looking at things. I found an interview with Nassim Harriman and Klaus Dona on the internet, and obviously Scott's show with compelling evidence. And however, I just didn't believe it. I could not believe that my friend was sitting there at my kitchen table with 10,000-year-old artifacts. It just, if that was coming out of the ground, I figured every person who was a scientist and a researcher of anything historical would be intrigued and all over this. And so I just didn't believe it. And I actually shook his hand for $5,000 at the table that I could prove it wrong and prove it to be a modern hoax, because I just really didn't
Wow.
believe it. However, I really liked the pieces, and so it gave me a reason to collect a few of them and buy a few of them, and as I started to go down the hole, I reached out to people like Linda Moulton Howe and Billy Carson and a lot of different famous people, Graham Hancock. Got a lot of ghosting, which I know these people are very busy, but one person like Linda Moulton Howe, she returned my call and actually had been to Stanford Research Institute with these tablets from it was not from Abuelos de Jalisco, but another part of Mexico called the Micochan. And there's a lot of different looking pieces like these big jade tablets that come from there. And Stanford Research Institute saw that there was mythological looking characters like Baphomet on this tablet, and they said that they weren't even going to do the test. They almost laughed at her and kind of humiliated her in front of these people, and so she said that she was pretty hesitant on it. But what she saw that we had was something really special, she said, and she wanted to look more into it. We spent quite a few months going back and forth, and then all of a sudden, at Contact in the Desert of all places, she had asked me if I wanted to be on her Earth files, and nothing ever came of it. She completely ghosted me on this, and so I just didn't understand why. And I've gone and just basically had to do all this research myself. No one in the industry or any archaeologist would help me. I gave books to John Hoops and a lot of different people, just trying to get some input or some validity of whether this was real or not. And there were some books that were published by Oleg Elistrov that were quite compelling, that had not just carbon dating, but thermoluminescent dating that was consistent with, thousands of years old all over the map. And so as I began to research this more, we found a place called Tula Hidalgo, and there was a company, Gen Six Productions, who's owned by Steve Quayle, that was doing a documentary down in the Micochan there at Lake Quetzal, and then they had heard that there was pieces also like this coming out of Tula near the pyramids there. There was a corn farmer who had property, and as they would till their fields, they would find stuff. And in the early 2000s, the INAH came out there and did some excavations, and they took all these pieces. Well, the grandkids wanted to see the pieces, and when they went in to show them at the INAH treated them like they had no idea who they were, said that they never turned in any pieces or had any record of this documentation. And it really frustrated him. So he contacted Steve Quayle. They came out there and started doing this documentary. They dug down to the 15-foot level. They used GPRs and georadars, over 10 different kinds, to look at the ground so they could make sure that it hadn't been dug into prior, because you can see if it's loose and if it's proper, and if the rest of the ground around it's packed in the same fashion. And so they documented all this very clearly and released this documentary here a couple years back. But they only got down to the 15-foot level and showed these pieces. There wasn't any further evidence at that time. And however, they did find a ground floor at that 15-foot level. I mean, a solid packed floor, like, and they didn't have the money to keep going, unfortunately. So they had to put this out, and that was the end of it for Gen 6 so far. They haven't gone back or done anything else. And so that kind of left it in the guys down there that own the property and in my hands to try to figure out what they found. And so we got the money together, and they went and re-rented the equipment and got down there to that 15-foot level. And that's when things got really interesting. It broke open, and literally an entire cave system opened up in front of them. And so the next month and a half, 2 months, I mean, it was every day with new discoveries. They found pieces with Anunnaki evidence, with extraterrestrial evidence, UFOs, all kinds of symbology that just, I mean, Star of Inanna and Venus and all these type of things. And So it was quite interesting. The biggest part for me though is that on the sides of these caves walls, as well as on the entrance, are petroglyphs of aliens that absolutely, I mean, have never seen carving like this before, let alone it was definitely not done yesterday because this was bedrock that was. I mean, it's on our website if you're curious, but it's very interesting to see
Well,
petroglyphs, and that's what kind of drove the nail in the coffin to make me write my books.
right, and I mean, some of the pictures you sent me, um, at first I really had to look because I was like, wait a second, I mean, this isn't like, oh, that kind of looks like what we would say an alien is. No, it looks too identical, too coincidental to the point where
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, 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 that's not that. I had to like check. I was like, is this AI? Is this real? And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going off of I always give people the benefit of the doubt here. I have some of the pictures here. I mean, it's astonishing. I mean, we got these ones where there's some workers digging. Um, so what is that? What's the is that
This is
a
about Yeah, this is about 10 feet down. There's a pyramid that started popping through. And as they continued to go down, there was a sarcophagus as well as a whole insetting. And what we believe this is like a tombstone or a headstone. And they cleared out the entire top. It's still under excavation underneath, but down, once they clear that out of there, there was all these tablets that literally show what look like stories right out of the book of Enoch. I mean, there's all the Egyptian characters, the Elohim looking beings, and so it's funny you say that with the alien situation. You look back to who documented the first gray alien. It actually goes back to an occultist named Aleister Crowley who had an
Aleister
experience in
Crowley? Yeah.
Egypt. So it's kind of an interesting coincidence that the United Kingdom claimed him to be the most dangerous man in America, and we have this topic that seems like it has a brick wall in front of it. And it's hard to argue at this point of what we're seeing. It's these aliens are there's tons of different species and races. There's some with wings. There's some that have feet. There's some that have the specter like Aladdin genie type tails like you would hear with a jinn. All these things in our mythology we're seeing on these pieces. And like on that one you just showed with that sarcophagus there's a beard that goes down there, and it looks just like the pharaoh beard that King Tut, the 15-year-old boy, has strapped on his chin. And if you look at why they did that and strapped this beard on, it was actually to emboldenize their creators in Kemet. And so, it's interesting to see these creator type beings who are, full of surrounded by alchemical symbols and different sorts of occult tools, pieces from Egypt. I mean, we find jed pillars, we find the rattle of Hathor, we find, obviously ankhs and pine cones and all the different things that you would see, even depictions of rings within rings and that sort of thing, like is explained in the book of Ezekiel. So,
Right,
it's
right.
yeah,
And I mean, so one of the things that I always say is that, I really do. I think there's this divide, and it's this mainstream, really this mainstream narrative that if that this is when civilization came up. This is when civilization went from hunter gatherer to um to like and uh the next level and the next level and the
mhm,
next level, and if you challenge that narrative, you are now someone who is against the narrative. So you're not just challenging the dates, you're challenging mainstream science. And most people, I mean, Grant Hancock is a good example of what when that goes right, but oftentimes that is not the case. And
yeah,
mainstream science beats people down into this very stigmatized, isolative bubble. So
mhm,
these discoveries go unchecked because people write them off because quote unquote mainstream scientist says no, there's no way. And
Yeah.
that is just so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, the prime examples there, Nazca mummies, the
I
Robert
was
Schoch
just gonna
underneath the Sphinx paw. There's quite a few of these, and these are mainstream scientists like Robert Schoch, a PhD, who was trying to say that there's logical science here, and no one really has anything other than false positive prone responses, and that's the tough part. I mean, Giorgio Tsoukalos just came out against us saying that everything that we're showing is 100% fake for sure, and for him to claim that is really odd because first of all, he's not an archaeologist. He's a BA in sportscasting, and second of all, he hasn't laid any hands or anything. So to go off of pictures and just immediately claim within 100% certainty that something is false, it almost seems like they're attacking something that might be a threat or in challenge to their narrative. And if you look at the shows that this man owns and helps run with Prometheus, it's interesting because they're all, prolonged things like Skinwalker Ranch and Oak Island. They want lots of seasons and they don't ever want this to end. So,
and why would
eh,
see, but that's the biggest fucking crazy thing is, don't you think someone like Giorgio, who does have a vested interest in ancient alien hypothesis, why wouldn't he look at this and be like, I want to know more? So,
yeah,
the guy who's profiting, whose show ran for 19 goddamn seasons on History Channel, which talks about, the all this stuff. Why was he so quick to dismiss this?
yeah. And same with the Boogosphere. Immediately says it's fake again, and no research given. I know the team that has it, Jaime Mossam and team, and I mean, there's a lot of science that's already been proven on this that
You're
completely
talking about
defies what we know.
you're talking about the spheres, right?
The
So
Boogosphere that they found, that aluminum one that I mean, it looks like one of those
yes,
orbs that's flying around. Yeah,
yeah. So that I find really interesting, because we do have video of metallic looking spheres flying around,
yeah.
and it defies, I mean, what we know to be conventional, aerodynamics, of course, but there's a lot of lore on those things. So, I mean, what do
Yeah.
you think of that? What do you think of those spheres? Do you think they're some sort of hoax, or
We absolutely have, like you said, concrete evidence. Even on Skinwalker Ranch, they've documented flying spheres on that show with their equipment, and not only that, but artists rendering it, and it had this band around the center of it, and I mean, so does the Boogosphere. So. Again, to dismiss something like this, like you said, if you're invested in this topic, this should be the bread and butter of your future going forward. You should want to eat up every bit of this, and make shows about it. And if it's not right, you could make shows about disproving it just to give your topic and your show more credibility. But instead, I mean, I read through the comments before that they were taken down, and I mean, he was getting beat up over this statement. So it's really interesting that someone would take a swing like that at these topics for what reason, you know?
right? So, I want to. When did you? Okay, and because I know you said it, and we talked about it a little bit already. But I mean, you come into this subject pretty skeptical. And when I say skeptical, I mean, are you talking about um UFOs, that you're skeptical that they exist, or this idea that um there's this race of beings that, the Anunnaki story, right? They genetically mutated human, or Homo sapiens to create Homo sapiens sapien, um, and they have a direct role. That we were created. There's Planet X. Were you skeptical of that, or are you skeptical of all of it?
I was skeptical of, well, I mean, for most of my adult life, until I was like 37, I was skeptical of all spiritual religion whatsoever. I always felt something when I perform music, and whenever I get into music deeply, like there's a spiritual connection there. So I know there's something, but as far as these
Yeah.
stories that we have and the books that we have, I just couldn't buy into any of it. And I just felt like I was being lied to and trying to be controlled and manipulated whenever I'd go to church. And so, as far as the UFOs and the Anunnaki story, I believed in the Anunnaki story most likely, or thought that that could be a very well logical explanation of how we got where we were, because our chromosomes mutated 250,000 years ago. There's a King's List that's 250,000 years ago, and to get everything balanced and in perfect synchronicity like we have, I mean, it's not just an accident. The Goldilocks zones that we have on this planet are so vast. You know, you take one just like the bees and Albert Einstein, how he said that we couldn't survive without them. I mean, that's significant engineering at the highest level. So something like that made sense to me, but I didn't think that they were necessarily the aliens that they were showing on, Third and ET or any of these movies per se, like aliens movies. I really thought it was more of a spiritual type thing, like the Anunnaki. And when I read through Zachariah Sitchin's work, when I started researching this, the Planet X thing was really, I'm still very skeptical of it. I think that they might actually be talking about heaven. And so, in order to publish things on these topics, it seems like when you bring religion into it, it becomes a minefield. And so, I think some of these authors and some of these people who did these early translations had to be very careful so they didn't destroy the balance of what we've came to know as our religions.
That's a very good point. That's a very valid point because, you know, it, uh, religion is a funny thing. Religion is a funny thing because obviously people live and die by it literally. Like
Yeah,
literally live and
a
die
lot
by
of
it.
them.
So, and you kind of see it in these Renaissance paintings as well, or even paintings from before that. Let's take the picture of the baptism, the baptism of Christ, right, where
Yep.
John the Baptist is in the River Jordan with with Christ, baptizing him, and there's a beam coming down from what they called a cloud, but it's clearly looks like a flying saucer, and it's
Mhm.
depicted that way in the painting. Um, and you like, I mean, you do ask yourself, like, is this all just misidentified, technology? And when we say gods, when they said gods, did they mean what we mean when we talk about quote unquote aliens and what we think is the
Right.
archetypal alien, right? So, what evidence, what among the evidence has really swayed you to the fact that we're dealing with the Bible stories, and there's at least truth to some of it. I mean, we found Troy, we found, we think we found Sodom and Gomorrah and places. So we know that there is truths. We know that there was most likely a flood. What
Yep.
other what evidence really like brought you to the other side? Oh
Well,
God, I thought I just heard something in here, dude.
oh,
Uh, Some knocking, and there's nobody here.
that's a new
That's
spot,
that.
huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh. All right. I'm sorry.
No, as far as the evidence go, I think. Well, it was actually reading the Book of Knowledge by J.J. Hurtak that slapped me in the face the hardest here. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know. I've tried to read the Bible. It's very confusing. All this is before AI. AI makes it a lot easier now to ask questions, but nonetheless, having questions is tough. And I started reading that book here. Someone, an archaeologist, reached out to me and said that these pieces resemble that book very, very much, and that I needed to look at it. And so I immediately went and found it. And I mean, it's hard to even explain because it was wrote back in 1973, but the synchronicities and how deep it goes is deeper than, I mean, anything I've ever encountered in my lifetime. Still to this day, it's biblical in that proportion, no question. And the type of gematria and stuff that's written into this thing is, I mean, it's a beautiful piece of work. And so things like that,
Right.
I think once I started to see these pictures and I started to believe that this was genuine, then those books were like a seed planted in my mind that I had a hard time to refute it. When I was a young man, 20 years ago, I was addicted to painkillers, and I thought I was going out. I did not think I was going to make it through this incredibly tough time. And I didn't believe in anything at the time. And I was so desperate. I got on my knees and I reached out for help, and I apologized for everything that I had done. And from that moment on, now everything is slightly shifted, and I can't argue that I've gravitated towards this topic and doing different things that have emboldened myself every day. Like every day was this progressive forward if I wanted it to be. And before that, it just seemed like it was a progressive backward. And so these little pieces have definitely been a chip on my shoulder to give me faith on that unconditional level. And seeing now what we see with all the pieces having Saturn on them, and researching Saturn, looking at Jordan Maxwell's work and some of these others with Saturn specifically going into the Jewish religion, into the Muslim religion, and it's everywhere, even in the Catholic religion. And so we have this Saturn thing where the Romans came from in terms of what they believed. And I think that that's a really important thing, because like we were talking earlier, why would you attack certain things like without science unless there was something that you didn't want to come from it? And so if you look at all the cancel culture in this world and all the things they've pushed away, you start looking at those as a possibility of, oh, maybe they were trying to hide this from us. It starts clicking real quick. And the demiurge with the Gnostics and the early Coptics, this story of the demiurge, if you place Saturn as the demiurge and you place the Divine Mother or the Sophia, the Isis, whatever you want to call her, as the creator of this thing, um, and that we're trapped here. Even in the Scientology, they believe in a similar concept to the demiurge, where we're trapped here. And you look at someone's work like Stanley Kubrick with Eyes Wide Shut, and how much ridicule. I mean, he may have lost his life over this movie. They cut 70 some minutes of it and wouldn't show it to us. And it very well could expose this elite that knows the truth that we're talking about right now, which is disclosure. And what disclosure is it aliens from another planet, or is it our ancient past that's been hidden from us? And that's kind of the question I leave it at now for myself, is I don't know.
And that's that is one of the craziest aspects of this whole thing in my experience, similar to yours. I am an alcoholic. I just don't drink anymore,
Yep.
I had my own experiences. I've been sober for 5 years now. Aside from medical marijuana here and there, here and there. But but I went 4 years of abstinence, and until my doctor was like, because I had lost my mother, and there's a whole backstory to that, and how I came back to this topic, left Hollywood and came back to this topic. So for me, I have a very, I respect you a little bit more, having you said something like that, because it does take a lot to admit that, because one of the things in the UFO community is your credibility, right? And if someone can poke holes in your credibility and try to use your past against you, we see this with like David Grush using his PTSD as a wartime veteran to try to undercut what he's saying. I mean, it's ludicrous. And with the community, so I mean, thank you for saying that. But why are we a species that is so advanced, and how do we not know our own origin story? So I start asking these questions, right? Rhetorically, I'm asking them out loud. Why? And then what are these supposed aliens? What are these UFOs? What is that? And is it being covered up? And if it's being covered up, which it surely is, who's it being covered up by? And I argue that it's the same people that are in charge of the Epsteins, the Diddies, those people.
Oh, it is.
Who are controlling our origin story, our narrative, what gets out to the public in a mainstream. I mean, Rick Doty's a great example of how easy it is to pay off media. Air Force OSI did it all the time. We are living in a consensus reality with a consensus history. It's not objective.
76% of all media is controlled by the same investment firms. And if you look at who those investment firms are, they also own a lot of disclosure. Johnny Enoch actually brought it to the table here a couple few weeks. Actually, it's been a couple months ago now, but he said specifically that that Vanguard and BlackRock were invested into Gaia, and I couldn't believe it. I had to go look that up myself. But to know that now and to see that brick wall there, you start looking at that those two companies specifically and some of the things they've done politically and into this industry and other industries, the control that they have on the media and this cancel culture. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I brought up Eyes Wide Shut, because this Hollywood elite thing that people talk about, it absolutely could be controlling this part of history. And you look at things like Scientology, specifically being so predominant in this culture. I've started to research maybe why about that could be, and it's very interesting. Like I'm not a Scientologist or anything like that, but just like I'm not any of these religions, I just find it very interesting to understand where they're coming from and how it might relate to the others, because there's no way that only one person's right here. And if you look at the way the it talks about the evil deceiving in the Bible and stuff like that, it's 80% truth and 20% lies. Like that they're going to use the truth to manipulate and pull you away. And so that's what disclosure right now, like this controlled disclosure movement, is absolutely being narrated in a fashion. Even like you said, Grush and Lou and all these people who have come out as whistleblowers, they still have to ask the government permission to say what they're going to say. And the government allows that, which is something that they obviously know this is moving in that direction and they want it to. Otherwise, I
Controlled,
probably wouldn't even be here, you know?
controlled disclosure, right?
Yeah,
It's to
bingo.
avoid it's to avoid the alternative. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because yes, all these quote unquote whistleblowers, they're not whistleblowers. By definition, they are not whistleblowers. If you go to
Right.
DoD pre-publication and ask for permission to say what you're saying, you are not a whistleblower. I
Thank you.
apologize. You are not. You're either unwitting, or you understand and that you are a controlled narrative. You are a controlled disclosure agent, whether you like it or not. You might do it with the best of intention, but you're not a whistleblower. They want you out there saying this.
Right.
And
And you look at go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, you look at
Oh,
Lou in the pictures, right? He keeps coming up empty-handed on these things, and that the Pentagon's laughing, going, "Oh my
yeah.
God, it's far too easy to discredit this guy at this point."
Yeah. Yeah, you look at the ATIP program and Sean Kirkpatrick and Brandon Fugel's little debate there that happened, and then you also look at I use Skinwalker Ranch here as well because Travis Taylor, who's their PhD, was recommended by the History Channel. Brandon said on the interview with Sean Ryan, and so that's an interesting play. Obviously the network encouraged this PhD, and he's the one helping. He's the one deciding what science gets done, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years into the show, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm a government agent as well, and I work for
Yeah,
ATIP, and they didn't know, so that's infiltrated there. But now Travis is also on Ancient Aliens and other programs, so it's like, the government is involved with these TV shows as well.
and that's why now people are gonna wonder why I led us down this path. To come full circle here, that is why you might have some people like who should have a vested interest in this, like the ancient alien folks, who outright say it's fake because they are controlled by somebody, and
Right.
the real stuff is being hidden from you. So
Yeah.
that's the full
Uh,
circle moment there for everybody.
and
That's
that's what
where
I
we
got
tie
from
it in.
when Linda Moulton Howe ghosted me there. That's all it felt like, is when she went to tell her producers that I was going to be on Earth Files, she got shut down, is what it felt like, because she was the most genuine nice lady. She's a stater from
Oh,
Idaho.
I've
Like
had her
like
on the
we're
show.
both.
Yeah.
She's just great. Like I really got great vibes, and we worked well together. So for that to happen, I knew something at a higher level had to have occurred to postpone that.
Yeah, and listen, I will say this about Linda, because I had her on the show. She was nothing but great. Like, timing. All right, I want to bring it back. So you've dedicated the last 5 years of your mission 5 years of your life to this mission. All right. Was there ever a moment, could that moment be now, where the truth felt too dangerous or too unbelievable to pursue?
No. No,
No.
no, because at this point I knew that if I had something happen to me because of this truth, then I would know in my heart factually and would have the most ultimate unconditional faith in God at that point because it would all click because I know the story, I've seen the pieces and I know what they're hiding. And so if anything ever happened, that would be an immediate. And then I asked someone like Scott Wolter, who's vetted into the ATIP, and he told me specifically like this was research that needed to be done, and so I think there's a lot of people rooting for this, and as far as the danger goes, I've never been contacted. I've reached out to the INAH. I've reached out to the vice president. I've reached out to Customs and Border Patrol and DHL, UPS, all these places that were handling my packages as I would bring these pieces in. I wanted to make sure I wasn't violating any laws. I actually have letterhead from the INAH on Mexican state paper that says that anything with a UFO or an alien on it has to be modern, as those things were created in modern times. So that's the way they left it. They wouldn't do any C-14. They wouldn't come out to the site. They wouldn't do any science whatsoever.
Wait, so because you use the word alien, and I don't know how you guys framed it. Maybe I'm speaking because I'm a layman in this. Because the word UFO or alien or the connotation was there, they won't touch this. They just assume that
Correct.
it's memorabilia and that they don't have to do anything with it,
Yep. Same
and
with
it can be
Stanford Research
transported
Institute.
freely.
Yep. Oh yeah, you can buy them all day long. I have thousands of these pieces in my house right now.
Can you grab a couple of the most compelling things and maybe talk? So I want to take this time because I know you have it. Can you
Yep.
grab a couple pieces and sh- the most compelling and like the ones that you can describe and show us a little bit of detail of of really compelling things that have been as labeled as memorabilia or what has to be modern day created. So
You can
these
see
are
like
all
some of this
things.
bronze work. The metal work is really where it's at because you can see the patina. I asked AI about the patina on some of these objects, and they said that the iridescence and the way they looked were completely impossible to make forgeries of. I mean, some of these crystal
So
skulls and things are 50, 60 pounds of quartz. I mean, we don't see this type of stuff, let alone they're not just beautiful carvings, but they're also tattooed with extensive amounts of work. Every ounce of it has carvings. The canoptic
oh
jars were a big one
wow.
for me. Sorry, it's a little unsteady, but these things here, I mean, they absolutely stink inside. They have the worst smell. Like they were actually utilized with organs at one point inside of them. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it stunk up my entire room when I got them. I was blown away. Some of the whistles
so
and things like this. I mean, this is like a 20-pound rock whistle where the eyes are the reeds. It's all hollowed out in there, the mouthpieces back
right.
here. And so
So
stuff like
you're
that where it's in tune. I mean,
these are all things that have been un these things have been uncovered
yes.
for the most part. These have been dug out of
Yeah,
the
we've
ground.
documents a lot of it on our YouTube and documentaries. I've wrote like you said 6 books. The newest one I did, Forbidden Relics, is just full of
Oh
every
man,
piece
I really
here.
want one of those. Oh
So
man,
it's it.
I I want I
Here, I'm
want to
gonna
put
see if I
one of
can shut
those in the
this.
studio.
Do it. I'm gonna see if
I
I can get one with the green here. You can see how it turns green. It's light in here, so you can't see it very well. But all these pieces have a
wait,
luminescent or
why is
phosphorescent
that
property.
turning green like that?
Well, they all have this green phosphorescence or luminescence about them. Uh, I mean, you can see it's just laced into the carvings in some of them. In others, it's blue, it's green. Like this one here will change from green to blue.
Do the skulls ever now I've heard this is things I've heard from other people, but do the skulls ever just like move?
No, I
They
haven't
don't
had
they
any
don't
weird.
No,
paranormal
no
activities or
weird
anything like that
experience.
yet. I'm not that I've seen. The only thing that's been kind of strange was that when we first came in, oops, let me go there. All right. When we first started this, I had about 60, 70 of these pieces that I had just gotten. We bought a large collection from a collector in Mexico. And the fact that people in Mexico collect these things and are hard to come off of them sometimes, that's also pretty interesting evidence. Just, they would likely know if these were being mass produced or if they were part of their history. And so that brings me to a point of there's a gentleman named Max that he did an interview in my book Anunnaki America, and he goes through and explains that he worked with the INAH, and that's how he learned how to
Can
dig
you
these things out.
you've said I can't even say that
The
right.
INA,
So
it's the
can you
Institute of National Archaeology and Anthropology.
okay. And okay, so for anyone who's just listening, that's what that is, and watching. Uh, because I wanted to know, I forgot to ask earlier. I didn't want to
Yep.
interrupt, but okay, so that's like mainstream archaeology guys are contacting.
That's the government archaeological ministry of history, essentially.
Okay, and again, what they're saying about these pieces is they're not actually artifacts. They are modern day carvings because they can't
Yep.
possibly be artifacts because and then do you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
have
I
you done
know.
any independent testing on like radiocarbon dating or
Oh yeah, yeah.
so what are your some of your results here? What are we looking at for time frames on these? Some of these.
So it depends on the area. What's interesting is there's a book by J.J. Benitez who did thermoluminescent dating of these tablets from the Miko-chan that have these were the ones that Linda Moulton Howe brought into Stanford research, and they had Baphomet and things on there like the Lady Guadalupe that were just hard to fathom that they would be ancient. And the dates there were 1825 years plus or minus 125, which is an interesting 200 to 300 years A.D. And that's an interesting time frame because some of the pieces show the Lady Guadalupe as well as crucified beings as well, and so that's one age. And the Miko-Kan tribe, they tell me that this is an oral tradition that their land was used as a genetic manipulation ground where they created many different races that used to roam there. And we actually found biological evidence that it's a body very, very similar to a Nazca mummy, but a way more reptilian. And it's documented in my book, this Anunnaki, the Mesoamerica connection. And so there's the biology is obviously that's something that still needs to be dated. But if you go to Abuelos de Jalisco, where I first started, there's pipe resin from 12,600 years ago that Scott Woltar had carbon dated. There's pieces that range from 12 to 25,000 years ago that have been
What
carbon dated
the
through the adhesive. And the adhesive on there is a red blue. I'll show you an example here with one of these pieces. But there's this red adhesive that glues these things together. You can see this red in between these lines that glue this stone to these other stones. And then this is a pipe here. And so these sometimes have resin that can be scraped out of them, and that's what he carbon dated there. And then as well as the adhesive, we have some bones right now that are these daggers. I can show you. Got it right
my
here.
God. So
So this is a dagger that we took this knob
thank
off of
you.
here. It had a big bone, joint thing, and so that's what we sent to the lab, and it will be dated. But this normally was a handle for a obsidian dagger.
My God. So, okay, so you
Oops.
talked about 12,600 years ago or 12 did you say 12,600?
Yes,
Okay,
12,600 BC. I'm sorry. So that's actually
BC.
like 14,000 years old or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, and now essentially what you are saying is if we are to take these tools, these are evidence of a civilization that existed well before the Ice Age and the Younger Dryas impact. And these are some of the remnants, or, you know, um, um, some of the artifacts of those lost civilizations and lost cultures, like say Atlantis. We don't have to put terms to it, but like Atlantis to give a
Yeah.
visualization.
There's a lot of story from Tula specifically, where we're finding a lot of these pieces that they have the Atlantean survivors that came there. And if you look at like this here, this is a star map, and it clearly shows the Pleiades at a place. And if you look at where the north is with the sea on there, you can see with AI, it'll tell you how old that thing is, and it comes out at 1,000 BC on that one. But the star maps range, and there's quite a few star maps like these you've seen probably from Iraq or Turkey, and they're called an astrolabe, and it shows all the different constellations. But you can put this into a program, and it'll show when the last time the procession was in that area, and it gives a pretty fine range. So the Tula pieces seem to all have these star maps in the 2500 BC to 500 AD range, and so the Abuelo stuff looks a lot different. The type of creation is way different. The language on the pieces is completely different, which is a big thing for me. If the age is that much different and a different language, it really brings the story of Babel into consideration here. And
Well,
so if this Babel and this flood thing happened, we might have a pre-flood civilization and a post-flood rebuilding of what they, the survivors or something, and that might be what the Spanish and things came down on in this area. All the Second Crusade or whatever you want to call it.
so and that's exactly what I was going to say is you have evidence of, and that's what I think we need to do as people, like not as but as human beings. We need to not dismiss religious texts and other texts because they're not the religion that you follow. What
Right.
happens is what we need to do is take a step back, all of us, and start looking at it as all right, let's piece this together, because everyone seems to
Mhm.
have a little piece of the puzzle, right?
Yep.
And but we can all agree, we have to find the common denominators. And because it seems that all of our religions, theoretically, I'm speaking in very vague manners here, but theoretically they're all really saying a very similar thing, and they all have
Yeah.
this really similar story, and the heroes and the villains and the bad and the good and the creation. And then comes science, and science is just a modern way of it's a modern way of reassuring ourselves that we are the alpha species by saying, but this is the same scientists who cannot tell you what consciousness is. So of
Right.
course, science is flawed, but it makes us feel better when we say it, right? It's science. It's science.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
is it all just the same fucking thing? When you know there's these ancient beings that had crazy technology, and something happened and wiped them out. Whether it was a flood, it looks like that's the case. But what
Mhm.
caused that flood? I think we have a lot to learn from these religious stories if we could just step back. And I mean, the Tower of Babel is a great story. Metaphorically, about our species is, you know, because what is the ultimate good, what is the ultimate um force, and that is a united human race, right? A united human race, there's nothing that we could not achieve, nothing. So we grow and we get too close to the gods, and then we're struck down and we're separated by religion, by creed, and we love to do that. We love to separate each other, right? And put ourselves
Yep.
in groups, and then we like to discriminate. So are we cursed with that for some reason? Because together we are a force to be reckoned with. Have we been tampered with to stay in line, if you will, and to you start asking all these questions, and it's like, for me, it's obvious that, like, what we need to do, but like, why can't we do it?
Right. We only use 20% of our brain for what now? You know?
Right. It's like
Yeah,
it's like
I think that's really important.
if some stupid motherfucker, and pardon my language, if some, if some guy from Boston can come to these conclusions that maybe we all should step back and look at this with fresh eyes and compare notes instead of, murdering each other and
Yeah.
holding the world hostage with weapons of mass destruction, and relying on something with the acronym MAD. Um, you know, let's hold the people of the world hostage because of our belief systems of which God is real, because that's what we do most of our murdering in. It's God's name. So people think that we're more advanced now. I don't know. I think
I think
we
if we
still.
if we really have these genetic manipulators who have created us, like the Anunnaki, or something's managing our species in this fashion. Let's say you were managing a species of, let's just say, corn on a farm, and you were trying to breed a corn that was going to make it through a hurricane or some sort of disaster, right? And so
Right.
you have to plant all these seeds, you have to find the ones that are stable, you have to breed them together, you have to create phenotype after phenotype after phenotype to breed out the issues, to get them stable again, all these things. Well, if you were trying to do that really fast with a living race with intelligence, you would want them to go through war. You would want them to go through the challenges so they could inherit the wisdom in a timely fashion. That could be why our age in the Bible was reduced down to 120 years. That after it was likely after the resurrection that this occurred, possibly, or somewhere. It doesn't specifically say that I know of, but
The thing on the
um,
telomere
but
caps,
I'm
right?
guessing that's where it's at, right? Because you look at the people in the antediluvian, and they were all old, and then after Moses, I think it's pretty much right after the Exodus, it's the 120 years. So
Did
these things are all there maybe for us, like this mystery, and us even talking right now. Would we be doing this if everything was good and we were all working together as one? And would we have anything to work on if we didn't have the threat of death and the survivalism that we have today?
those are all very, very fair points, by the way. I tend to, did you see Jaime Musan? I'm not Jaime Musan, Jesus. Did you see Zahi Hawass on Rogan say that
Yeah.
not only did he say multiple times that he was a scientist, but he wasn't a scientist, and he is an archaeologist, but he's not. So not only does that guy not know what the fuck he is, but but he said he never heard of the King's List.
I know.
The
I know
King's
that I just.
List. So I'm sorry, please,
There's
and
no
like you,
paper on it, I guess.
yeah, you and because it wasn't discovered by Zahi himself, it does not exist, and he's open minded, but he does not have time for theories. That
Right.
won't, like, bro, which one is it? Because you can't be both. You fucking
I
idiot.
I'm really bad on that though, because my whole life, I mean, I was a skeptic of this because I didn't have the science on it. And even with, I mean, so the carbon dates are conceived, or the manganese deposits on this copper whistle, like there's things on here that are just signs of age that you're not going to get very easily. Um, but still, it's not science that's going to prove to someone like that this is real or not. And I think that's where we've had to really step back and look at these pieces and try to find what about them. And this is actually, we're working on a peer reviewed paper. I can't go extremely in deep about it, but there's peer review on these pieces that are going to show that the way these are made and constructed is not something that we can do today. And I can pretty much just leave it
Would
at that.
would you would you be open to being flown into the studio with some of those pieces after the peer reviewed paper comes out and talk and walk us through
Of course.
the because what I think most people don't understand is peer reviewed papers are, I mean, it's basically you submitting it to the science community and saying, this is what we found. Now the science community can look it over and they can,
Prove me wrong.
because exactly most of what they're trying to do is prove you wrong, honestly.
Yep.
So, but it's the best way for these things to move forward in an open
Yeah.
environment, and that is the way that things are done. So
Yeah.
but the general audience really doesn't know what a peer-reviewed paper, that they will not sit and read a peer-reviewed paper. So maybe you can come
No.
on, show us some of the pieces, and talk us through layman's terms of like what have to happen for this to be ruled this? What are the implications of this? Because I mean, all right, say what is the oldest known, what is the oldest mainstream recognized site? What is the old, is it Gobekli Tepe, right?
I would say Gobekli Tepe or Karen Tepe there. Yeah. Yep.
Right? It's one of those two.
Yep.
So um a lot of what what you have would even predate that by a long shot. Is
Or
that
being consistent with that. I mean, there could be, and how, who knows, because of the lack of excavation and the lack of knowledge of that era, what else we haven't found in the ground. I think with these SAR scans and stuff that they're showing in Egypt, that we might see some of these sites be able to be looked at with a little bit more peeled back mentality. I mean, you look at what LiDAR's done to the jungle, and there's all kinds of cities and stuff we didn't even know about. However, to get there and to actually get the permits and the science to fund it, that there seems to be a real brick wall, because some of these have been discovered for a decade and we haven't even really scratched the surface. And
and
they
that's
said the
the
same with
odd thing.
Gobekli Tepe. It's going to take 100 years to fully excavate that site. I mean, 100 years? Really? Is this Oak
Yeah.
Island Part 2? I mean, I don't know, man. It's
But
really
but
crazy though to think that we can't get in there and get it done.
and that's the thing, another thing, because and I don't want to attack Zahi here, but you know, Rogan brings up these recent scans that they did, and
Hmm.
Zahi almost immediately dismisses it by saying
Yep.
it's not. I ran it. He says I ran it by the top scientists in the world on this, and they said it's impossible. And so, I mean, these people, because Zahi's the gatekeeper for Egyptology. He makes
Yep.
the decisions. Somehow he makes the decisions on everything and anything that happens in Egypt. So he has become the gatekeeper. And if you go against what he is saying, then you are not allowed to
Yep.
talk about it in a serious way. And that's a danger. I'm glad he went on Rogan. I'm glad he looked like an idiot, because now I'm
Yep.
glad he came off as arrogant, because that's who that guy is. He smokes a cigar and he fucking yells at people and screams. I mean, he's known for that on
I
documentaries,
know.
yelling and
I
screaming,
know.
throwing fits and shit. So,
Yep.
like, that's not to me, that's not a serious scientist. That's a businessman.
Right. Yep.
So, but what do you think? What do you think the implications of these pillars under the Great Pyramid would be, and things like Robert Schoch? If we find this thing below the Sphinx paw,
Mhm. I
what
think
do you
there's
think?
there's definitely something down there. I mean, we've got messages in certain areas that Thoth left certain things, and they're not supposed to be opened. And there's all kinds of rumors and things about Egypt. But if you look at the team and their science that they've presented, there's absolutely nothing in my brain that says that we should not at least double check based off of these scans. And those top scientists in the world just say it's impossible, but they don't bring any science to say why it's impossible. And
Why?
we know that we have scanners that can look into the ground, and we see these scans, and then we see other scans from this same company's satellite underneath laboratories and things like that, showing these 200 feet in the ground bases and stuff like that. So you have to really wonder, I mean, why aren't we doing a core sample here? I mean, it wouldn't take much to do a core sample to see if there was
Well,
structures underneath this thing, right?
that's. I mean, I don't know if you want. I don't know how far you went into this, but I figure you would have gone into it a lot, because it is that field that you're in. So
Yep.
sort of. But Flint Dibble, when he was on Pierce Morgan, he he like screamed about. He's like, you cannot dig at the Sphinx, and it was like, what do you mean, dude? They're digging all the fucking time.
Yeah.
Like,
I
You
know.
could take core samples of that area. Like you're not gonna blow the sinks up because you took a core sample
Right.
200 yards to the north. Like this guy's out of his mind, and he
Yes.
represents quote unquote mainstream science and
Yeah.
archaeology.
So he went up against Graham Hancock on a debate on Joe Rogan here a couple,
Yeah.
maybe a year ago or something like that. And, he really was just pushing all these things. And what one thing was that he came out and said actually helped our argument heavily was because a lot of these objects, they come out of the ground and they don't have the right type of erosion. And this is a prime example here. This type of stone here might actually have a glaze on it and may actually be ancient pottery or ceramic and exotic ceramic that is there because it has a phosphorescence like pre-Hispanic pottery. However, it does register as stone when you XRF and look at it with
So
analysis. Go ahead.
what is that? What is that? Like what?
This
Because to me it looks like a tobacco pipe.
Yeah, it's a pipe for sure. The and tobacco and other not anything psychedelic or anything was found when they examined the resin that Scott had. It was just tobacco and a couple other herbs that are local to that area. But yeah, they
So
definitely smoked.
so okay, then that's what I was going to ask is so what we're saying is so this idea of smoking tobacco and something about tobacco and uh smoking, like lighting it on fire and inhaling it, this seems to be another thing that's passed down through like culture,
Yeah,
ritualistically to begin with. I think nowadays obviously like we're addicted to cigarettes in a different way. But so there were ceremonial pipes, and that dates back to when?
oof. I mean,
You don't know
we've
yet?
got 12,800 years as the resin inside of it, but that doesn't mean that it
Jesus
wasn't,
Christ.
1,000 years old already at the time, and they were just that's the last time they smoked out of it. These could have been passed down. Our Native Americans, the Lakota tribe, they have ancient pipes that they've held in their tribe that they use on the smoke, the sweat lodges and the smoke sessions that they do, and so yeah, I wouldn't doubt that this is
Do
definitely
you
something that's old.
do you think that something like ayahuasca, because like you have to think about the shamans and stuff, the way that they prepare, uh like if you get a real shaman down in South America doing the ayahuasca, there's like rituals and shit to it. And
Oh
it seems
yeah.
like it seems like that there's something to that whole ritual that seems like it's some like ancient tradition that's been passed down to like enlighten and to maybe bring people to another world to show them the capabilities and to inspire them to be and do the next best thing, because it like all of a sudden your mind is just expanded to limitless capability, and
Right.
that seems like something our ancestors would want to make sure made it through any disaster,
Right.
would be this
Yeah,
kind
the
of
recipe,
this.
how they found that out in first place is such
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
what are the odds they would pick this and do this and that, and because like people don't
some
realize you don't
advanced
just pick.
knowledge.
Yeah, you don't just pick it from the tree and smoke it. There's like
Yeah,
there's so many aspects to ayahuasca and like even marijuana that like it has to be cultivated,
right. So
right?
marijuana
So
is a really interesting one. That's my profession. I own a cannabis company. That's what I did before I researched any of this stuff. And I'm actually writing a book on cannabis because it's actually both these paths have kind of crossed in terms of the spiritual aspect and what it does. The hippies would always say, "Free your mind, man," and you'd hear this back in
yeah,
the day. And so what's funny is they were onto something. They just didn't have the science of the pineal gland and what it was doing to the endocrine system and stuff like that to really convey it on a professional level. But now that I've done research, there's strains like Chemdog and OG Kush and GMO cookies with these things called phenols in there, which is what makes the strain gassy. It's also found in garlic, onions, and skunk spray. And these phenols have an extreme medicinal property and affect the pineal gland very heavily. It can cause a homeostatic stasis that you can't really acquire in any other fashion. People that have ADD and certain types of focus issues often feel really relieved. They'll sleep sleep better, they won't have nightmares as much because of these thiols specifically. And that's why people are out there hunting seeds and hunting these different strains constantly, because they're looking for this. And to get it consistently, it's quite uncommon in most cannabis breeds to get a high thiol count. And so I believe that this is actually giving us protection. These plant medicines are freeing our mind from this demiurge or this false reality that we live in. It talks about the seven sins and the seven seals and the seven chakras, and they have to be exercised and opened in order to transcend, and all of these different things that cross into many different religions and cultures. Um, I feel that there's real connection to that. And you look at the Romans, how they switched over the frequencies of all the instrument tunings from what was it, 432 to 440. And so it went from 7 tones to 8. They're like, oh, we get an extra note per octave, it's great, but the reality is that the tones no longer sync up with the chakras, and you're not exercising your chakras when you're hitting the chords and hitting the different harmonics. Therefore, you're not going to free yourself in this respect. And
Right.
I think that, have you ever done the ayahuasca before? Yeah, so
Yes.
I mean, you leave your body behind, like it's gone. You see
Dude,
it laying there, like,
I was, I shot up through my head, like
Yeah,
through what they call what is this, the head chakra,
the crown.
the crown chakra. It
Yeah,
was like
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
it was like I exited my body through that, and then all of a sudden I'm in this tunnel thing, but it's not a tunnel. It's also not. It looks like a tunnel. That's the best way I can visualize it to people. But
Yep.
it was like the world was the universe was bent around me, and I was walking through like this glassy universe, and then in the distance there was this being, and it wasn't, I know people talk about machine elves, mine was not a machine elf, mine was just a hooded figure. And when I looked into when
Interesting.
I
Hmm.
yeah when I got to him, or it when I finally got to it, it looked at me, and there was no face, it was just emptiness. And it
Wow.
but it gave me a feeling that I'll never forget. And it was like, your body, you shouldn't be here right now. Like
Yes.
it was like a you shouldn't be here right now. How are you here? You need to go back. And then
Hmm.
I kind of got like mad at him, and I was like, but no words were spoken. I had no idea how I became mad at him, but I knew his thoughts. Like I knew I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to be
A
there,
feeling of
and he thought.
rejection.
Right. So I walked past him like maybe 2 feet,
Mhm.
but it feels like eternity while you're there. I walk past him.
Yeah.
I feel myself get about 2 feet past him. Boom, snap back into my body. And the DMT, that was DMT. Ayahuasca was a whole different beast. But
Yes.
um, ayahuasca was, I mean, wow. That was like, I was still here, but I was above myself. I was reviewing my soul. And it
Mm.
was, yeah, I mean, it's truly, it's, I, I recommend it for people with trauma.
Yeah. If
And
it calls to
people,
you, you probably shouldn't turn away. I wouldn't
yeah,
recommend recreationally doing it for fun.
no,
It's
no,
definitely not a toy, and it's something that should be very well utilized with an elder or a shaman, like you say. They have the ways. They know the drum frequencies. They know which way your body should be bent and how you should be sitting, and they know when to catch. Like all these things that if
yeah,
you're on your
there's a
own
lot
and
of,
you're doing this, you may think you died. You may go into
yeah,
severe panic. That's what happened to me. I had panic attacks for weeks after. If I even thought about it, I would start feeling, I'd get the metallic taste in my mouth and everything. Like it was horrendous for about a year after I did it. I've never touched anything else after that. But I'll tell you what, it
yeah,
gave me such a respect. Whew.
because it shows you everything that you've hidden, that you've
Yeah.
bottled up. And any coping mechanisms you use, it shines a light on them, and is like, and like, you're too busy being afraid of going back to that everything else is like, dude, it's easy to just not want to do, because
Yeah.
you never, I've never thrown up so much in my life. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. So But anyway, so I say this because we think of technology as this, right? This block
Mhm.
that this this would look like magic, by the way. At least what we're told to the Egyptians. If we showed them a backup battery, that would blow their minds. This tech,
Yeah.
this cell phone has more technology in it than the spacecraft that went up to the moon. We look at technology as like hard, right? This technological, but
Yep.
do you think our ancestors also had technology that is what was non-physical? It was consciousness based, or like you say, sound, light, and frequency, the keys
Yeah.
to the universe. Do you think that there was technology that we wouldn't necessarily call technology? Maybe we'd say it was magic. Do you
Absolutely.
think that they possessed such a thing?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think on two levels, I think we find a lot of pieces. We find wands with crystals on them. We find pendulums. We find Ouija boards. We find all of these type of things
Ouija
that
board.
scream. Yeah, yeah,
Like
full on
I
Ouija
thought
boards with
I thought the Ouija board was like I thought that
you
was
know,
a
the
invention.
Well, that's what they want you to think about chess too, but we find chess boards as well. You go back to India and it's called the age-old game of chess, probably for a reason. But yet, there's all these false positives. Oh, this was created in the 1300s. The Lady Guadalupe can't be any older than that. Well, that's when she became popularized. And Baphomet was first illustrated in the 1300s, but that doesn't mean that they didn't take it off of ancient sources and descriptions from the Library of Alexandria, which we don't have anymore, and
Right.
created this being that ends up looking just like the one that we find carved in the pieces in Mexico. Like that's a false positive scientifically. You can't disclaim something just because someone invented it. Look at the Nazca mummies with these implants. Okay, inside of them is osmium, which is what we use on satellites and stuff. And that wasn't first synthesized until the early 1900s. But the thing with osmium is that it takes tons and tons of platinum refining in order to get just a little bit of it. So you can't just mine out a big old block of osmium and be like, yeah, I'm going to pound this into an implant. Like it has to be refined. And so these bodies are 1850 years old on the carbon dating. How did
My
they have
God.
osmium then? Right. But
My
again, this will
God.
never be talked about on the news. Like they just claim these things to be cake. And I mean, the science behind them is so overwhelming.
That's
It's
so
actually been a
funny.
really good role model.
But it's
What,
also
what is
pretty it's so funny that you said it. They joke about the cake because that cake thing, that was like it was it
Yeah.
was honestly a genius way to discredit the whole thing, was
Right.
turn it into a meme as quick as possible.
And,
And
and
that's what
then
they
and then
did.
there was demand for evidence. And what's funny is we actually spent $15,000. I bought two Nazca mummies on October, I believe it was the 7th or the 8th. It was right after the congressional hearing with Jaime Mausam in Mexico. And they came out on the news saying that they were fake and that they were cake. And there was a gentleman down there that I'd talked to researching this stuff, Fernando Cordova. He allowed me to publish a lot of the pictures of the Nazca mummies in my book. And I ended up getting in touch with someone that knew him, and they sent me two dolls. They dressed them up like dolls, and they sent them. You might have seen the pictures. They've become famous. And what's interesting is they went through the DHL scanners, and you could see that there was metal implants and the bones and everything, but they claimed that those were once constructed by animal bones. And looking back at the pictures now, they very well could have been. They may have even sold them to me and constructed these just to come out and try to smear it as a thing. And so this actually has really influenced Jaime Mossam's $350 million lawsuit against Peru for slander and disinformation, because they completely tried to gut this guy's career, calling him a fraud when they have no evidence and he does. And so this is an ongoing lawsuit currently, but I think
Wow.
it's definitely something that should be noted, that they might be going to that level even to try to create fakes their own. And we have that gentleman I mentioned, Max, that gave testimony in my book. He states specifically that the cartels are making pieces like this in replica of the real ones just to saturate the market with fakes for whatever purpose, to try to keep it a secret. And
Right.
I believe that. We've seen it.
Maybe some quid pro quo between, the intelligence community or like whatever, and the cartels, like, all right, because we know that things, people can be bought and things
Oh
can
yeah.
get they get let slid, if
Yeah.
if you want to call it. So, there's these quid pro quos, like maybe, hey, you do this for me and we'll let this much get in, you know, no matter what, right?
Are you
You
talking
know,
about politics?
just in general, yeah.
No, I
Like,
know, right? I'm being
yeah, just in
sarcastic.
just
Like,
yeah, 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 just in general. So we know that people can be corrupted, and people are ultimately the ones controlling this at the end of the day, and they're
or
flawed
are
just like
they?
we are. Well, that's a very good point.
I mean,
Um,
everything we see on these pieces is these, fallen angel looking beings and stuff. And if you look at the occult and Ouija boards and World War II and what the Thule and Vril societies were doing to get information and technology for Adolf Hitler and the war there, and how World War I ended with the Ottoman Empire, who had all the Babylonian relics because they had just conquered Constantinople some years prior. All those Babylonian relics, I mean, that's the Anunnaki stuff. And so if we're finding Ouija boards and all kinds of occult tools here in Mexico, that I can only imagine what they found in the city of Ur and some of these places in there that, you look back to like Zachariah Sitchin's work and right before the Gulf War and some of the stuff that they found. I mean, we're just now getting to see the stuff out of the Nimrod's discovery there. And I just saw some of the gold pieces and stuff. I mean, this is 20 years ago already, you know?
and it's crazy. It's truly, it really is. It blows me away that, I mean, really, like because this fairy tale that we as kids that we're told is that, there's the history books and we know everything, right? Because you look at adults and you go, well, the adults, whether it's your parents or that figure in your life, that the parental figure role model, you look at
Mhm.
them and you're like, you one day I'm going to be like them and I'm going to have all the answers. And
Yeah.
it's not until you slowly get older that you realize everybody is winging it day by day and nobody has any answers. We all just pretend that we do. And that's the big curtain pull, the Oz moment, if you will. Because you know we realize that our parents, they're not gods. They're and that we're not heroes and we're not villains. And the you know the but then we're told that the world is black and white, and we find out that there's so much more gray than
Oh yeah.
anyone ever led us to believe, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and who do you think was the first one to cover this notion of aliens up? I bet it was the church.
Yeah, I would definitely say that this goes back to the Catholic Church, and I'm not meaning to isolate because it could be elsewhere too. But I think with the Romans being Saturn worshipers, and then all of a sudden overnight Constantine says, "Yeah, we're Christian now." That they're also the ones that killed Jesus. And if you look at the persecution of the early Christians, they went through and gutted these Orthodox religions. Like right now, there's only 2% blood Jews, like that actually have the blood in their system that they're supposed to. So 2% is so low at this point. You think the Holocaust probably had something to do with that. And then you look at these religions and look at the new covenants that have been formed that kind of pushed the Orthodox out. And I mean, obviously, there's things that from the Orthodox that they wanted to try to migrate away from, or that it was, in the old fashion. But still, I think that it's very important to see, like right now, specifically the Orthodox Jews and how much their opinion differentiates from Israel, the country, or what's going on over there. You see interviews with them, and it just doesn't add up. So yeah,
Yeah,
the church, everybody, there's even movies about it having all these relics in their basement or whatever. For what reason though is the big question. And um, how, I guess just maybe if this demiurge story is real, then that would make sense that they're just trying to cover up their tracks. It says in the Bible that the devil's biggest deception will be to make it seem like he doesn't exist. And if you look at the Cathar people, which is a big one, the Cathar people accepted Jesus, and yet they were still burned at the stake and completely eradicated. And I'm not talking just one pope had it out for them. I'm talking 9 popes gutted this civilization, man, woman, and child, because they had Enochian beliefs that they believed there was two gods, one in the Old Testament that was a bad god and one that was a good god. And I think that that's the demiurge story and the divine intervention that we see is this separation. You notice they're called demigods. Well, that's probably because they're creations of the demiurge, you know. But this
Right.
demiurge is something that's suppressed heavily, um, and
And that,
I can't get away from it, you know.
yeah, I mean, if we look at the church, um, as a whole, at the time, they're judges, juries, and executioners, right? So they run the land of the law, and you know, I don't know. So I kind of consider it the first intelligence agency,
Yeah.
and I would love to be able to raid their archives at the Vatican. But I mean, do you think, like, given what you found, or what the things that you've been that you've seen, do you think that, like, something like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, could it be real, and could it have the power or possess something that it's said to, or is this just misunderstood technology?
No, I absolutely think it's real. Not only because there was a government paper that was declassified recently from the Pentagon claiming that they remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant, and multiple things around it that was just too much to. I mean, the fact that this is a CIA document was just blowing my mind. But that aside, you know, we find all these pieces. We've actually found arcs in Mexico, which is interesting, and they had the elongated heads on the cherubim on there, which that could be why it's hidden now. It might have a different looking being. I mean, obviously everything was humanized at one point, but maybe in the antediluvians with Moses and pre back that we have different elongated head beings. I mean, you look at Osiris and you look at some of these things. Um, it could be consistent with that. A lot of these pieces, let me see if I can find a quick example here. They have what look like mermaids on them. And let's see here. The mermaid thing is really fascinating because you can see, you know, it's got this, you can see it very well there. This is like a winged being, and then he's got this like serpent-like tail that comes back here to a fishtail, right? And if you look at the being Dagon and the
Right.
relation to the Pope's hat there, and certain things to the fish and Jesus, um, Poseidon, all these things that came out of the sea, Atlantis. There's a lot of correlation there. And if you go back to Osiris, who was supposedly the first pharaoh, his feet in every depiction of him are not like any other Egyptian's feet. They're always banded together. It looks like one foot.
Who?
And Osiris.
Oh,
And
right.
it talks about Isis, how she had to rebandage his legs all the time. And some people say it's because he was half in the living world and half in the dead or whatever. But I find that it's really a specific shape that they're depicting his legs, and he very well could have been one of these beings that came out of the sea that are talked about by the Dogon people, because the Dogon people somewhere in the past got exiled out of Egypt. Nobody can tell me why. And they're the people of the dog. They're also the people who supposedly brought cannabis here. They told the Greeks that they brought cannabis here from a place called Sirius B, and this was
Which
3,400 years ago that Greek scholars documented this. And
Right, and we didn't even know that that existed until, like, a
Hubble.
modern right, and that also gives that notion of rediscovery. Like, just because someone invented something or discovered something doesn't mean it hasn't been discovered. It just, your society hasn't discovered it yet. So
Yeah.
what is invention if not, like, that feeling that you have when you do music, right? That idea of the muse and pulling from the
Yeah.
ether. Um,
Yep.
you know, so that it brings it all
Not
to
being
that for me.
closed-minded.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Osiris's legs is always, wow.
Always put together. You'll never see them separate. Every other, you see there with well, I don't know if that's probably Isis there, but her feet are always separated. All the gods, Set and Thoth, oh, they all have 2 feet in almost every depiction. Nothing like that. But I'm just thinking he may, and he's got the elongated head too, and gave birth to the pharaohs and whatnot that have elongated heads like Akhenaten and so on down the line. And So
Yeah,
that could be where
he's
the evolution came in to be humanistic. Like that might be where that came from. His skin's also green, which is peculiar,
yeah, and he really is always depicted as this like really
and he's
like
got the beard, and his
his
beard's
let
not strapped on. And
right.
oh, so about the beard, I was explaining this earlier and I got sidetracked. I'll do that a lot. I apologize, but it's a lot to go over. The braiding of that beard, if you look at it, we actually have pieces here, and I'm going to look around to see if I can find one. But they have what look like Cthulhu on them, and you can see here this one has the beard on this being. You can see his head, and he has it. And so they have like a garment on there. You can see it's almost like a woven garment that's holding this thing in. And it's not quite the same as the Egyptian one. But the
Hmm,
Egyptians did this to resemble the creators of Kemet. So this could be one of those creators here. And these beings, if you were to take this garment off, it looks like Davy Jones. It's straight squid faced. And so that's why they braided them and wore this garment to cover up their tentacles. And if you look at those
interesting.
Dogon people, they had an encounter with what's called the Nomo, and they were amphibious creatures that came out of the sea and provided them knowledge. And I mean,
That's a
it's an interesting
story,
concept, you know?
and that's a story that we hear over and over again in ancient cultures. Is a guy, not a guy, but a being that comes from the sea that restarts
Yep.
civilization. And
Emerging from the
you know,
waters.
emerging from the water, whether it's Kukulkan or what is that, the Aztecs,
Yep.
and then
Kukulkan, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of it, Osiris, and I mean,
Thoth,
could these
yeah.
Thoth, yeah, and could again, could these be, could Egyptians and the like you said with the braids emulating, and then the elongated skulls? Why does that happen across
Right.
cultures? For the
And,
same
and they say
reason.
it's waterboarded, right? Or they say they're banded together or banding or whatever. Not
Yeah,
waterboard. I said that wrong, but that
yeah,
banding.
banding.
So, but they did it to look more like their gods. So,
Yeah, that there's no reason other than to disfigure yourself like that
right,
that would be the ultimate showcase of I want to. I mean, we talk about the cargo cults, right? And that idea of what it means to worship and what it means to really divinely believe in something. And you see it here with the elongation of babies and doing that to your child. Like that takes a certain commitment, and that commitment
right,
comes in this weird part of our DNA, that this want to appease this god, or to this higher power. It's like wired in our DNA. And then you go back to the notion of were we tinkered with by some sort of civilization like the Anunnaki. And it kind of all circular tells a story of most likely, because we clear, like every other organism on this planet has something that they do for the ecosystem, except
right.
us, except us. We just want to create, and we like this iPhone. If we
We're
stopped
consumers.
making, yes, if we stopped making iPhones today, they would work just fine forever. If we just stopped, and we're like, this is the one, this is
Yep.
the one. Like we're good. We're good. We can halt all production. We're good. We got everything that we need. Um, but we can't do that. We can't.
No.
And like you said, we're consumers, and that story of the Anunnaki and us wanting gold, and why is gold so valuable to us?
The
Like
gold's a weird one. Yeah.
the gold is a weird one. It is a very weird one. So, I mean, do you believe that? I mean, again, this is speculation, and we'll definitely wrap this conversation up. But I'd love to, like I said, I'd love to fly you in after that peer-reviewed paper,
Yep.
and kind of dive into this a little bit more broadly, because I love this topic. I haven't talked about it in a while, but I mean, if you had to sum up your mission in not one sentence, but um, if you had to give the elevator pitch on what your mission is to the people watching or listening right now, what is that? What would it be?
My mission was to to either disprove or prove these items to be either antiquities or modern replications. At one point or another, it was either going to be the biggest hoax I'd ever seen, or something that was so epic to our origin story and our history that it was even at the 0.001% I had to follow it. And so my mission is to assimilate the truth out of this one way or the other, and also encourage others to demand science and evidence rather than just caving into what the celebrity says and trusting it. Because just like our AI and our celebrities and our news stations, we all know that there's manipulation there, with whether it's politics or religion, all these things. Look at the game of telephone when you're in kindergarten. Are you going to trust what the kid tells you, or are you going to go out there and figure it out for yourself? And that's, I think, where we're at, is we have to do some of this for ourselves to make sure. And if we don't put our hands on it, who's going to?
Absolutely, absolutely. And where can people? I know you say you have some documentaries out,
Yeah.
and so what are I'll put all the links in the description below, but where can people find your work, and where can people follow you?
Yeah, aliencarvings.com is our website, and it's a compendium of just a bit of everything on there. All the papers from Mexico, all that stuff is there. Carbon dates. Our documentaries are all on YouTube at Alien Carvings. All of our social media is at Alien Carvings, and yeah, I mean, our books are all available on Amazon under Michael Forrest, and
Okay.
yeah, we've got, everything's, hard book, with just extensive pictures and documentation of, as much photographic journalism that I could take. I'm a photographer more than I am a writer, but at the same point, I've become a writer now because of this topic. So
You gotta, that's the thing, right? You become that's what I, for myself as well. It's like, obviously in different fields, but I'm the host. I get the guests, I maintain the guest relationships, I edit the show, I write, I do all this stuff.
yep,
So, when you get in this topic, you become a walking machine of like how to get things out there. So it's super fun to watch that
totally.
process, from that side. And hopefully I can help elevate the conversation in even the slightest bit and get it out there. So you're always, you're always welcome back to talk about this stuff. I love
Appreciate
the
that.
idea of ancient civilizations and lost knowledge. And like I said, read this, because, even Tesla, right? Guys like Tesla,
Mhm.
Einstein, they all talk about, like, oftentimes genius and geniuses, they talk that they're just conduits. And it's like the
Yeah.
knowledge, even, with Oppenheimer, it's like the muse is there, and it's working through them, and
Hmm.
that's, there's something there. So the rediscovery of technology, or these things, these artifacts, it's something that I think we always should give a second look at, because we owe it to ourselves to understand our origins and to understand our place in the universe. I don't understand why people don't take this more seriously. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
So, and to everyone else out there, what it is, like, subscribe, all that. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave a review, and a 5-star rating. It really helps with that fucking algorithm, that pesky algorithm. All right. Keep looking up, right? And Michael, thank you again. We'll see you guys
Thank you.
next time.